Hey guys, my name is Albert Ellison III. I'm a screenwriter, producer, and award-winning director. I'm currently in production and on set of my first feature film, The Profession. In the description below the video, you can find a link to my free screenplay guide, which is an outline of the first 10 lessons in this course and every fundamental element to screenwriting. These are worksheets you can fill out as we discuss the topics, so you might be able to retain the information better. It's my gift to you, so submit your email and you'll find the package in your inbox. Get your hands on the worksheet before we proceed into this episode. Theme, character, and plot. In my last video, I went over what I define story to be, which encapsulates theme and character at a more foundational level. In this video, I want to go over the plot portion of the puzzle, which I would define as the structure, and explain why structure is valuable for storytelling. The definition of plot is the main events of a play, novel, movie, or similar work devised and presented by the writer as an interrelated sequence. In other words, it is the structure in which we lay the events of the story to make a sequence which properly expresses the journey and argument of the story. Structure are the principles and tools a storyteller uses to guide his story into a focused, thorough exploration of his story, executed in a satisfying and dramatic fashion. It is important to recognize structure as a principle rather than a rule, and to understand this properly, we should start by diving into the history of where structure has come from. If you attend a modern film university, you may be walking away with the impression that the most universally accepted form of structure, the 3-act structure model, was invented by Sid Field in 1978 when his book Screenplay, The Foundations of Screenwriting was published. But I would like to argue that structure was never truly invented, but discovered. The earliest manuscripts we have that records anything about the structural means of storytelling as a form is Aristotle's Poetics, written sometime between 384 to 322 BC. The Poetics reads as some notes Aristotle took on the stories being told in his era. He references that every story seems to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. He also progresses to define the structural habits of the stories he was watching as either comedies or tragedies, the earliest hints at genre pieces. Aristotle here is alluding to the fact that these are powerful ways to look at how to tell a story, because it is what we, as humanity, recognize. We are born, we live our life, and we die. A beginning, a middle, and an end. Let's say you drive to the store to pick up some food for your grandmother. You have to park and find a basket, then you march into the store only to find the key ingredients you were looking for are out of stock. That's a beginning, a middle, and an end as well. But then you have to call your grandmother to inform her, given the context that you drove and you had to park and find a basket only for this outcome resonates with the grandmother because now she feels bad that she had to put you through that trouble. The point is that we live a story. We communicate through stories. We learn through stories. Much of human perception is through that of a story, and we discovered this 3-act structure with a beginning, a middle, and an end to be the most powerful version of a story: a setup, the journey, and the resolution. Preceding Aristotle, in 65 to 8 BC, came Horace, a Roman theorist who took the development of drama into a created set of rules which had an oppressive influence over playwright for nearly 2,000 years. Where Aristotle was noting the archetypal elements universal to an impactful story, Horace made a spreadsheet as a blueprint for how to specifically tell a story based on these musings. As history progresses, we see these constant cycles of people examining the organic structure of stories versus people turning it into arbitrary rules that cannot be broken, and then another comes along to shatter that. Cited from an article by Janine Lanouette, we can observe this progression in the history of story. Quote, "But of greater impact was a text titled Technique of Drama by Gustav Freytag, which came out in 1863. Freytag's text was the first modern playwright manual to concern itself almost exclusively with developing pragmatic guidelines for the construction of effective drama as opposed to dictating arbitrary rules, promoting abstract theories, or outlining preferred thematic subjects. Many of the terms and concepts widely used in screenwriting text these days, such as controlling idea, cause and effect, and rising action, were first published in this book. Among his structural innovations, Freytag identified the point at which the beginning of the story that sets the drama in motion, which he called the Urigen moment, or exciting force. His definition of this event is generally analogous to what today is referred to as the point of attack, the inciting incident, or the catalyst. But his greatest influence was through what has come to be known as Freytag's pyramid, a graphic representation of rising and falling action in the shape of an isosceles triangle. On this graph, Freytag charts 5 parts to the action, with the climax occurring squarely in the middle of the drama at the highest peak of the pyramid. He carefully avoids the word act, with its connotation as an arbitrary segment of scenes, to focus on what is peculiar in purpose and construction of the component parts, thereby moving towards a model based on structural functioning. Nonetheless, his 5-part thinking indicates that he has not yet broken free of the 5-act dictates of Horace. There's a lot of history to dive into, so if you have any interest in the inner workings of this process, I would recommend reading that whole article, and I'll leave a link to it in the description. Even today, there are many famous books published that rival the opinions of others as to what the ultimate structure pattern should be. I want to emphasize that sticking to a formula is not the key to success, but neither is abandoning structure. In our next video in the series, I'll focus on which of these structural tools I think you should pay attention to or not, but let's refocus on why structure in the first place is important. There has been a movement in the modern art house world to let go of structure completely, which ultimately results in films with weak stories. They meander and find no truly compelling argument by the end of the film. I think structure is valuable for storytelling because it helps you properly convey your story in the most dramatic and satisfying way, so an impression can be left on your audience. Few people want to watch a movie where nothing happens, where there is no conflict or theme. This rebellion from structure is simply that, a rebellion from the norm for the sake of. If the industry standard were to have structureless films, the art house rebels would be running to structure to be different. It's a double-edged sword because they have reason to run from movies with such overbearing formulas, but with no structure at all, you cannot craft a compelling narrative. To bring it home, structure is valuable for storytelling because it can help you stay on track with expressing your story in a way that will resonate universally. It can seemingly guide you through setting up your story, exploring it, and then resolving your argument. When structure and story marry one another properly, a memorable, dramatic story is born. Without one another, it cannot be whole. Remember guys, you can get my free screenplay guide in the description below. Submit your email to receive that before we continue into this recap. Structure is the means of plotting events of your story in an effective and focused way so that you might express your story in the most engaging, impactful, and dramatically satisfying way. Strong structure equals a well-told story. Remember that structure is principle, not rule. There are many structure guides, but the point is not to form your story within a pre-existing model. The point is to use structure to properly set up, explore, and resolve your story. Your story may fit perfectly into a pre-existing structure model, but that is never the end goal. Abandoning structure is to abandon the art of telling a compelling narrative. Structure is not a restraint of artistic freedom. It is the means to strengthen your story. Story and structure must marry one another to properly execute your story. Thank you all for listening to this episode. If you did find it helpful or informative in any way, please leave it a like. But if you thought it could have been better, leave it a thumbs down so that I know to do better next time. I hope to see you all in the next episode where we talk about which types of structure you should use for your story.